This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. The music you hear in the background is provided by Jeff Brisbane. The name of the song is I Wish You Enough. And on Avoid the Maze, we wish everyone enough. Find yourself. And today, my guest is Deborah Laurel. And Deborah, I have to tell you, when I read your bio, it just sparked such an interest because one of the first lines says, in my career as a trainer, as a result of starting the first female theater in the Midwest. I love it. You know, growing up in the 50s and 60s, I guess I was a little naive. I thought women were part of the landscape. And I'm learning more and more that they certainly weren't until pioneers like yourself pushed society to start accepting us. So, welcome to Avoid the Maze and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay, first I want to clarify, it was the first feminist theater.
Okay.
You know, women have always been in the theater, or at least for a long time.
Right.
Okay, I've been a trainer since 1973. I design curriculum, I deliver skill building workshops, both classroom and virtual, for managers, for employees, and for trainers. And I've done a lot of international work, which has been a fantastic benefit for me and hopefully for them. And I started off my career because of that theater, because we were performing at a university, and the play was called Empty Space Blues, and it was dealing with how the feminist movement was affecting women in all walks of life. And afterwards, we would open it up for conversation with the audience. And two professors from family studies, because this predated women's studies, came up to me and they said, we'd like you to teach assertiveness. And I said, great, what is that? Said, that's what you're doing, and read this book. And that's what got me into training.
I love it. Yeah, and you know, like I started it out by saying, I always felt there was a place for females and women in society. My mother, I won't call her a feminist, but my mother was very active in saying, hey, you can do whatever it is you want to do. But don't depend on somebody else to get you there. You have to do it yourself. And it was a great learning experience in my life because when I found something that I wanted to do, I worked very, very hard at it. I'm not a good one to accept failure. And so I would push through. So tell me a little bit more about this feminist theater that got you going. What was it about the theater that said, hey, I need to take this to the next step?
Well, the feminism, began around in the early 70s, and my first association with it is Gloria Steinem on the cover of Ms. Magazine saying,
right.
And she also talked about the fact that we're not human doings, we're human beings. And the feminist movement affected women in very different ways. There were some women who were already married with children, and suddenly they're thinking, maybe that's not what I was supposed to do.
Got it.
Then gay women, lesbians, who were suddenly, maybe this is wrong, but it seemed like they were able to be more visible now, the idea of women loving women.
Right.
And the business of assertiveness really hit me to the core. I was an abused child and I was abused wife. And I got out of that relationship. But the reason I got out of it was because I had support and I was assertive. And part of being assertive is recognizing you have a right to be treated with respect and you have a right to live without feeling afraid.
You know, those words are so important because there's still so many young women today and even older women. I've heard of women in their senior years that have said, I don't know how to get out of this. You know, I am still being either verbally abused, physically abused, or those old tapes keep playing in my head. And we all can get out. I too got out of a relationship that was mostly verbally abusive. And I don't think he understood that he was being that way. You know, over the years, I finally have realized that he was brought up in that culture. And I accepted it in the beginning because I wanted to be that good wife. And then when I woke up one morning and said, I don't want to accept this anymore, that's when it became even more apparent to me. So we all can get out, and it's not always easy, but you know, we have so much life to live that we shouldn't be stuck under somebody's thumb. So first, I want to say I'm sorry that those are the experiences you had, but you took those and turned them into positivity. So how did you do that?
While this was going on, I was working in state government and I was working in the first affirmative action office for the state of Wisconsin. And I was an EEO counselor trainer and I did an investigation and I found out about a very clear situation of discrimination. Women building, I don't remember what they were called, but building maintenance workers were not being promoted. And so that was a prima facie case of discrimination.
Sure.
The result was that the superintendents of grounds were all ordered to attend a training with me. Now, you need to understand, my hair was down to my waist. I didn't own a bra. I was wearing a jean skirt and, a band top. And I was in my 20s. And every one of the groundskeeper supervisors and superintendents were male, were probably in their 40s to 60s, all burly gentlemen. And I'm in this training room where there's only one entrance and exit, and I'm at the far end of that. And I'm realizing that if they really got angry at me, they could bury me on the Capitol grounds and no one would ever know. So I began by essentially saying, you were naughty and you shouldn't do this. And one guy got up in the back, started yelling at me, and I'm thinking, that's it. I'm dead. I can't get out of here. And so I listened to him. And what he basically was saying was, I've been raised to take care of my family. And I don't want my wife or my daughter or my sister up on the Capitol roof when it's icy out, when they could fall and kill themselves. And I said, okay, that makes sense. But what about those people, those women who want to do that? Don't they have a right to do that? If your daughter really wanted to do that, would you stand in her way? And so we had to talk about how society's, our culture was, he was well-meaning. He didn't mean to discriminate. Sure. He had daughters. He didn't discriminate against women. He was taking care of them and pointing out that taking care belongs at the home. but that's not his responsibility as a manager.
I love that comment because it it reminds me of so many different cultures who and especially when I was growing up, women were they were the extra part of the family. Okay. They had their place. They cooked, they cleaned. If they did work out of the house, it was out of total necessity. Um, and yet when they came home, they still had to cook, clean, and everything else. And there was my father was a very hands-on husband and father, but my mother still came from that older culture. No, I have to vacuum. I have to clean the house. And that's what I learned in the beginning. And so when I got married in the 70s, even though I was hearing all about feminism and I could do what I wanted to do, I kept thinking, no, my mother trained me right. I'm going to do all these things. And it wasn't until I got divorced in the early 80s that I realized I don't have to do all these things. And if I get in another relationship, I have to identify what I'm willing to do and what I'm not. Um, and I don't think that happened years before. I think women just got married because that's what they were supposed to do.
Well, and there's also the issue of the noise in your head, those
Right.
voices. I had one of my assertiveness classes, there was a woman who was complaining. She was so tired. And why was she so tired? Because she worked all day. She worked a night job, and then she had to keep her house spanking clean. And I said, well, why do you need to do that? Because that's what my mother expects. And I said, well, how often does she visit? Oh, she's been dead for 10 years.
Oh,
And the look on her face when she realized, maybe it didn't have to be quite that way anymore.
you're
But we carry those cautions, those warnings, those societal signals in our heads. And it's very hard to even recognize that that's what's moving us in a certain direction.
absolutely. And what I like what you did with that gentleman was you you came to his level. You said, "Well, explain to me." Okay? Rather than saying, "No, don't do that." Well, explain to me what prompts you to do the things that you do. And again, his upbringing said, "You take care of the women." Okay? Um, you help a woman across the street. Well, why can't a woman help a man across the street? Okay. And today we do see more of that, which I think is wonderful. But it takes time to change those patterns. And I think sometimes we get a little bit hostile because patterns aren't being changed fast enough.
I think that's very true. Although, of course, we have generations of women who haven't had to deal with what we had to deal with.
Right.
And yet there are also current generations who are dealing with the very same garbage.
Right.
Back in the 70s and the feminist movement was starting, I think we all really believed, the ERA would be passed and everybody would be treated equally and we would have partnerships and relationships. And, the recent Supreme Court ruling, that we don't even have control over our own bodies.
Right.
And it's men making the laws. And it makes, I'm not going to get on a soapbox if I haven't already, but it makes me so angry.
Well, and
it's also
we're finding
terrible.
out, yeah, and we're finding out it's making a lot of people angry, even those individuals who may have supported the Supreme Court ruling, realizing, wait a second, what was I really supporting? They're now going back, they're listening to everything, and they're going, wow, you know, there has to be some give and take here. And you know, I don't want anybody to tell me how to take care of my body. Um, and that's one of the things that when I did remarry, my husband of 38 years and we discuss it all. And if I say no, that's not going to happen, or this is what I need to do, it's okay to disappoint each other because we're individuals. And I'm hoping our listeners really get that. But I'm going to go back to the 70s when Gloria Steinem was, I don't know. I don't know whose idol she wasn't. Okay. Um, did you get to meet her? Did you work in tandem with her in any way?
No,
No.
I didn't.
But you did her thing your way, correct?
As so many women did. Yes.
So what kind of opposition did you personally find when you were going out in your denim skirt and no bra? And I have to admit to the public, hey, that was me as well. That probably was the only rebellious thing I think I did. But I had to make a statement. So, what was it like for you when you made a statement for maybe family and friends around you?
I was a workaholic. I didn't have family around me. I'm in Wisconsin and I'm originally from the East Coast. So all I had was my daughter because I came out here when she was 2 to get my degree. I remember more what happened as I worked in affirmative action than I remember what happened to me personally.
Okay.
Somebody put sugar in my gasoline tank. When I was, this was much later. This was in the 80s.
Okay.
I was in charge of a task force, and one of the directors in the agency had been ordered to attend this task force. And the task force was to decide what would be the basic personnel policies and procedures necessary in 72 different state agencies.
Okay.
And he was so angry that he had been ordered to attend. He had me come in his office. He threw me against the wall. I mean, that's how entitled, that's how angry, that's how violent some of my interactions were with men in supervisory positions. Now, that wasn't all of them by any means.
Sure.
But you just need one kind of situation like that rattles you pretty much.
Absolutely.
The reason he was so angry was because he had been at odds with personnel managers in state agencies, and they were going to be on the task force, and he didn't want to have anything to do with them because he saw that they had nothing in common and they'd always been at loggerheads.
Right.
And knowing that, I had this task force, which was comprised of anybody and everybody who was affected by the personnel system. So personnel managers, legislative aides, union representatives, the works. I had them identify what the basic goal was, and they all agreed on the basic goal, that people should be treated fairly. And we were walking back from the meeting, and this same, I don't know what to call him, but the same director turned to me and he said, I've been arguing with him for 20 years. It never occurred to me we're trying to do the same thing. And I wanted to slap him.
Oh, wow.
On the one hand, I wanted to slap him. On the other hand, I thought, okay, I did it. I passed it.
It's interesting because the same problems we had back in the 70s and 80s we're having today. And that is, we are making assumptions of what everyone is saying. And if it doesn't sound exactly like our words, we think we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And the reality of it is we need to talk to each other almost like children do, because children hear it all. They hear what they're saying and they hear what their friends are saying. And, we wonder how children sort of can just adapt so easily. Well, it's because they listen better than we do. And I found recently, and I've been taking a lot of coaching classes, and I have 3 different coaches I'm working with, because I realized that to some degree, that's how I live my life too. This is my belief. Oh, you're not saying it my way, Deborah. So, hey, you know what? We must, we're going head to head on this. But now when I listen, it's like, instead of saying why, I ask people to explain more deeply. Where did you learn that from? I have some young kids that I work with on the weekend, and their answer is, well, I learned it on Twitter. Okay. So that was somebody else's opinion. And that's great that you have somebody else's opinion, but let's get some facts behind it. And maybe you can convince me that what you heard on Twitter is correct. But until we delve into it, we're not going to know. So, as you've been doing this in the 70s and 80s, and here we are in the 21st century, and we're already 22 years into it, have you noticed any good positive changes for women today?
If you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have said yes. Right now, I think we're in the 1950s in terms of how women are being treated, how they're being seen, the rights that are being taken away. It's a very scary time to me. I have 2 granddaughters. Hopefully this is a cycle and we'll get past this horrible time. But I don't know if I would call it evil, but the vindictiveness. I mean, when you have a political party who is kiboshing things that will make life easier for everyone, just because it was proposed by the other party.
Right.
It's very, very frustrating. It's very frustrating. We had a governor come in here, not our current governor, but a previous governor, who came in, and suddenly the Equal Rights Amendment didn't matter anymore. A bunch of various things didn't matter anymore. They had been taken off the books. And it felt like he had walked into my house and opened my cupboard and taken every one of my prized dishes and smashed them on the floor. I mean, it just felt that a home invasion, but a soul invasion.
Right. And it's sad because you and so many others, and myself included, we've worked to get to the point of being seen and heard. And according to the Constitution, we have that right. But yet when somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm going to take it away from you, or at least I'm going to put a muzzle on you. It is scary. And I have said to so many of my friends, in the 50s and 60s, I saw this beautiful utopia that I was going to grow old into. And I can find the beauty of the world amongst, my peers and things that are important to me. But this is not the way I thought I was going to be living out my life. I didn't think I was going to become an activist in my 70s and say, hey, cut out all the bull, because that's what it is. We were doing fine before. So you have two granddaughters, and that's interesting because you obviously want to turn things around or help them turn things around so they can have the freedoms that we've had so far.
I do see, of course there are changes that have been made. The ability to identify what your sexuality is, even if it's momentary, as long as you're in a safe space. But more people are speaking out.
Sure.
Certain. I had to wear a dress to school. I don't know if you remember what we wore for gym.
Yep.
Was
bloomers.
Exactly. Yep. So a lot of things have changed. And we have some outspoken activists. I mean, I think about Jane Fonda.
Absolutely. Yes.
And Lily Tomlin, who are amazing. And we have women directors who are being recognized, and we have women heading up huge corporations, and that wasn't really that clear
exactly
years ago. So I don't want to give people the impression that we have lost everything. We run the risk of losing quite a bit if things keep up the way they are, if people don't vote for the values that they feel support women's rights and everyone else's rights. It's still a beautiful world. What I think, I've done a lot of training in the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. And when I was in Eastern Europe, in Croatia after the war, when there were still landmines all around, I went there with my son, who was 10 at the time. And he spent the day with the family. And although he didn't speak Croat and they didn't speak English, you know how when kids are together, they kind of take over each other's mannerisms.
right.
And I was thinking, if it were possible for all children to go to different countries, we would not have war. We would see that we're all human beings doing the best that we can, that we share so much more than we differ.
That is so true. And in the last 10 years that I've been podcasting, I get more amazed each day that whoever I have on as my guest, there is at least one connection that I see between us. And that's when I realize we are so much alike. And it reminds me of a day, I probably was maybe 9 or 10 years old. My grandfather lived with us, and we happened to be Jewish. And my grandfather felt that he could speak Yiddish, even though he could speak English, he would speak Yiddish around all of us. And I'm the youngest. I never picked up on it except for maybe 1 or 2 words. But I came home from school that day, and we had a woman who came in once a week to do the ironing because I had 2 working parents. And my grandfather is sitting, watching her iron, talking to her in Yiddish. And Tempe was this big, husky, black woman. And she always came in a like a nurse's white outfit because she wanted to be prim and proper. Love the woman to death. And I remember walking in and I said to her, Tempe, do colored people understand Yiddish? And she goes, I don't understand every word, but as I listen to your grandfather and I watch his expressions and his hand mannerisms, she said, I can pick up on a few of those words. And then in English, my grandfather looks at me and he said, what are you interrupting for? We're having a nice conversation. And I remember that it was so enlightening to me because if you want to be friendly with another person, all you have to do is listen. And eventually you're going to find that tie between the two of you. In the story of your son, I think that's terrific because a lot of 10-year-olds today, if you put them in that same situation, they would not be happy. They would be very vocal about it.
Oh, he loved it. Yeah.
Well,
And I don't want people to think that I took him into a place where he was in danger. I was just saying that it was still after the war. We knew
Sure.
where to go, where not to go.
So you did a lot of traveling over the years. And again, growing up, you probably weren't sure if that was going to be part of your future. So as you started doing that and counseling and speaking to people, did you all have like a revelation like, oh, wow, look at me. I'm a different person?
I don't think that it was a conscious change for me. It was eye-opening to see how what I taught made a difference. That was eye-opening. When I was in Croatia, this was because of the war, they'd lost their infrastructure and they did not have a cultural belief in entrepreneurism. And George Soros's Open Society Institute sent me there to help train adults, professors in one place, business people in another, to train business people in how to start their own businesses. And so I was there to train them on how to train, not what to train. And it's a very long story, but it was a 6-day training. And at the end of the training, the last training day, they were to facilitate an activity that they had designed. Okay. They had absorbed. These are people who were used to lecture, who were not used to interacting with the professor at all. And I get there with cush balls that I'm throwing and candy and music. They liked Elvis, by the way. And showing cartoons as well as having them design and develop training materials. Sure. And they had absorbed everything. And their facilitated activities were brilliant. I cried. They were so good. And I have seen that. And I'm not saying it to blow my own horn. I'm saying sure. People are if they're motivated to learn. And I've seen that in Jordan. I've seen that in Dubai. I've seen that in Zambia, in Lusaka. That's when your eyes open and you say, okay, I'm doing something right. And they're taking it and they're running with it and they're making it so much better.
Oh, and that has to make you feel good about yourself because, as you said, for many years, you weren't treated as an equal. You were abused And now people are looking at you and going, oh, I know what she's talking about. Oh, this is what I can do. Um, it's so wonderful when we can um, change one life, and we don't have to change it completely. And I bring this up on almost every podcast we do here. I know some podcasters look at their analytics day in and day out, and how can I get higher up on the scale and get more people to listen to me? And my comment is, number one, if this conversation helps me, my time is worth having this conversation. And if we get just one listener who says, I don't need to be a doormat anymore, I can be who I want to be, um, and realize that, you may be going against the grain in your community, but being somebody who just follows the pack um, can be very destructive to our own lives.
Yes. We made a comment earlier that I want to qualify. Not all women get out of abusive situations. And I think, one, they love the abuser. Two, they feel responsible, which is that abusive codependency relationship. But three, they don't have support. And when I was getting out, there weren't support situations, they weren't safe houses. There are those things now. So if anybody is listening tonight or today and is in that situation, it's so dangerous. It's dangerous for you. It's dangerous for your children, both psychologically, emotionally, and physically. A lot of abused women are killed. So please do what you can to get out of that situation.
You know, it makes me feel very sad when I hear of women who can't get out or think they can't get out. Because I remember when I was getting out of my relationship, um, the first people I called were my parents. They lived out of state. And I don't think my mother really meant it the way it came out, but it started with, well, what did you do? And I said, I didn't do anything. And she goes, are you sure? And I remember hanging up from that long distance phone call, and I spent a day or two just crying my eyes out. If my mother is asking this, who else is going to? And then I called my sister in law and I told her, and she said, I don't think that's how your mother meant it. I think your mother wanted to make sure that you knew what was happening. And she said, your mother just doesn't have the words for it. And if it hadn't been for my sister-in-law, I probably would have hated my mother for the words that she gave me. And so to our listeners, the first person who you reach out to, they may not have the right words for you. They may not have any answers to be able to help and guide you. But there are a lot of support systems out there. And I will put some in today's show notes because I think that's very, very important that we all know that as dangerous as it may be to get out, it could be more dangerous staying in that situation.
Good.
So when you got out of your situation, you said there were no support systems. So how did you do it?
I had some friends and they took me in because I had to get away. And then going through the legal system, he talked me into our both using the same attorney. No. And he was a high-ranking attorney in state government.
Oh my.
And so he knew the judges, he knew people. And finally, because he was stringing me along, I finally had told my attorney, you tell him that if he doesn't agree to this divorce and a reasonable settlement, I'm going to go to the newspapers and I'm going to let them know what their preeminent attorney is really doing. And boy, just like that settlement was reached. And I didn't ask for alimony. I mean, I didn't even think of things like that.
Right.
I just felt I needed to get out of there. And so my other message to other women going through that is get your own attorney and make sure that you get the financial support that you deserve and you need.
Absolutely. You know, it's, and for you women out there, you also have to know that in some cases, it is the reverse where the man has been abused as well. So find your support systems. We'll put that in today's column. But in addition, Deborah, how can our listeners reach out to you if they want to know more about you and support the causes that you are working for?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, I have 2 businesses. And so if you go to the Peer Learning Institute on the website, or you go to Laurel and Associates on the website, you will find a way to contact me. I think that's the easiest.
We'll make sure we get those in the show notes as well. And I want to thank you for joining me today. You know, you've reconfirmed that I did the right thing many, many years ago. When I found my partner now of 38 years, I knew how to look for him. And that makes a big difference in life, because the last 38 years haven't been perfect, but we've gotten through them and we've gotten stronger each day. So I'm very grateful for that. And we're all going to check out the Peer Learning Institute, because I have a feeling there's a lot of information out there that can help all of us.
Actually, the Laurel and Associates is where they would find that information.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.